Welcome everybody. I'm Mark Skelly. I'm the Acting CEO of the Hutt Valley Chamber of Commerce, and welcome to today's session on how to create a submission, particularly with relation to the RiverLink project. 2 weeks ago, we ran a session on the RiverLink project with the project director, Tom Newson, and the project partners to give an overview of the project, what's involved, and the fact that the consent has been lodged and the submissions are open, and submissions for this consent close on Wednesday, the 22nd of September. So today is about understanding how to make submissions in that process and to fill in some blanks for people that haven't had experience in this, which is most of you that are watching today. So thanks for being here and watching today's live stream. The Resource Management Act provides several ways for you to get involved in planning processes and influence decisions that affect the environment. Making a submission on a proposal is an effective way to get involved with decisions under the RMA. So again, thanks for being part of this today. RiverLink is, as we've talked about, the biggest infrastructure project in the history of Lower Hutt. And so we really encourage you to have your say and make submissions. Submissions, as I mentioned, need to be received by 5 p.m. on Wednesday, the 22nd of September. So this morning, we're going to be joined by Sarah Jenkin. Sarah's a senior planner with GHD who will take us through how to make a submission step by step. Sarah's been working as a planner for over 20 years. That's included running consent application and decision-making processes. She's part of the consultant team working on RiverLink and has been involved in the application right from the start. Her current role in the project is supporting engagement from a planning perspective. There will be time for questions at the end, and Anna McLellan will be joining us. Anna's a Senior Resource Advisor, Environmental Regulation at Greater Wellington, who's the lead regulator. She'll be joining us. That's quite a mouthful. For anyone watching this live stream at a later time that's not participating live, do feel free to add posts or comments and questions, and we'll make sure that the RiverLink team see those and have the opportunity to respond. If you're watching live, please feel free to make comments, ask questions during the live stream. We'll see those and we will make an effort to work our way through those during this live stream. So right now I'm going to hand across to Sarah Jenkins from GHD, and she will take us through a presentation on the process. Thanks, Sarah.
Tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai, haere mai ki tēnei hui. Ko Sarah Jenkin aho. So I'm Sarah Jenkin and welcome. I'm just getting to grips with the technology, so hopefully this will work. So I'm going to take you through making a submission in terms of the RiverLink project. But look, this is also general guidance that would apply no matter the notified application that we're dealing with. So I'm going to cover off 3 things: the resource consent process, making a submission, and then what's going to happen next on RiverLink. And the graphics that you can see here are snips that come from a series of guidance that the Ministry for the Environment has written called the Everyday Guide to the RMA. And that's a really good set of guidance for getting to grips with planning processes. And the information that I've prepared around how to make a submission is drawn from that guidance as well. And there is a link to that on the Greater Wellington Have Your Say website as well. So, resource consent process. This is an image that the Ministry for the Environment, or MFE, prepared a number of years ago, but it's still really relevant, I think. And I'm just going to quickly walk people through where we're at. So the applicant has an idea. In this case, it's RiverLink. They'll prepare their application, which includes a number of different documents, and they'll lodge that with the council. In this case, with Hutt City Council, so the council that manages land use around Lower Hutt and the area, and with Greater Wellington Regional Council, so the regional council who manages the environment across the Wellington region. Where we are at the moment is that Greater Wellington and Hutt City Councils have accepted the application and they publicly notified it. So they've put it out and said to everybody, hey, we would like you to tell us what you think about this. And so we are in the middle of what's called the submission process. So a number of people have received letters directly, there have been notices in the paper, there's information on the website. And so there's 20 working days to make a submission, and as Mark has mentioned, that closes next Wednesday. So this is where we're at the moment, just in the bottom left-hand corner. So what makes up the RiverLink suite of documents? We've got 2 applicants. So we've got the RiverLink applicants, so Greater Wellington, Waka Kotahi and Hutt City, and they are responsible for different aspects of the RiverLink overall project. And then we've got KiwiRail. So KiwiRail has a specific part of the project related to the railway line. We've also got 2 applications. So we've got the RiverLink applications for all of the work associated with that project. And then we've got an application for KiwiRail for the small part of the project that relates to their infrastructure. And there's a variety of supporting information. So there's an assessment of effects on the environment, a number of technical assessments, a framework for urban and landscape design, and drawings. And this is all of the information that's available on the GW Have Your Say website. And so just a little bit of vocab. So the Resource Management Act, which most of us refer to as the RMA, is the overarching legislation for New Zealand's planning system for controls around how we use land and water and air. Hutt City Council in this system is known as a territorial authority. So that's the district level council. So like Wellington City Council, Upper Hutt, Hutt City, Kapiti Coast, etc. The regional councils, so in this case, Greater Wellington Regional Council, sit above the territorial authorities. You'll have multiple city and district councils within one region. So in Wellington, the Greater Wellington region extends into the Wairarapa, up the coast a bit, and the councils around Te Whanganui-a-Tara, the Wellington Harbour. The regulators, or the consent authority, are Hutt City and Greater Wellington. And so they've got different names, but regulators or consent authority relates to them being the organisations who make decisions on resource consents, who will decide if someone puts an application in, whether it should be granted or not. Now, part of RiverLink includes designate or notices of requirement and resource consents. So I thought I'd just explain the difference. So a designation is used for public works, and it's a form of spot zoning. So it will cover a specific area and it authorises activities on that site without the need for a land use consent. So it's a different type of authorisation. You start a designation with a notice of requirement, which is a document that identifies the land that's required in order to build and operate that public work. And so the RiverLink application includes a number of notices of requirement for different aspects of the project. And then the people or the organisations who are able to issue these notices are called requiring authorities. And they include local authorities, network utility operators, and the Crown. So Waka Kotahi, KiwiRail, Hutt City Council, Greater Wellington Regional Council, they're all requiring authorities. So they're specifically able to use this particular process. A resource consent is required either from a district or regional council, and it's about managing activities and the effects of activities on land, water or air. And so we've got a number of different resource consents required for the RiverLink project. And the other thing I just wanted to talk about was the decision maker. So oftentimes the decision maker is the consent authority or the regulator. Sometimes they will delegate that decision making out to independent commissioners. And so in the case of RiverLink, there will be independent commissioners. So hopefully that all makes sense. So I'm going to move on to how do you make a submission? So anyone can make a submission on either of the applications. Regardless of what you want to happen, the best submission is one that's clear and understandable rather than one that's not. So as a submitter, you can decide whether you support or oppose RiverLink and or the KiwiRail applications, or you can be neutral. You can also request to be heard in support of your submission, and that's regardless of whether you support or oppose or are neutral. And I'll explain in a little bit what request to be heard means. Your submission needs to state the effects that you think one or other of the projects will have, whether it's positive or negative, and why you support or oppose the applications. And if you want to see changes, you can identify what you think those changes should be. So a good submission is one that sticks to the facts. It focuses on environmental effects. This is what the RMA manages and is responsible for. You'd be specific about your concerns or where you think the opportunities are, and you'll tell Greater Wellington or Hutt City what you want them to do. So they're the consent authority, the regulator, so it's their responsibility to make a decision on this. And you'll see that Greater Wellington and Hutt City are also part of the applicants. That's entirely possible, and so you have a different part of those organisations as the applicant from the regulator. Tell them whether you want the applications to be approved or declined, and write in clear everyday language. So things to avoid in your submission: it's not about personal feelings. You need to keep to the RiverLink and KiwiRail applications. So matters that are outside of that, as much as they might be really important, aren't part of the scope of what we need to look at here. Now, this may not be relevant for RiverLink, but I thought it was important to make a note of as well, is that you can't object to something on the basis of trade competition. So because you think that something going ahead will have an impact, something going ahead by a competitor will have an impact on your business. You can talk, however, about the effects, positive or negative, you think a development might have on your business if it's unrelated to trade competition. So once you've decided what you want to write in your submission, you've got 4 different ways to get it to council. The online method is by far and away the preferred method. And so that's going on to have your say and filling in the form there. And it will ask you all of the questions, and by doing it that way, it will make sure that you've put in all of the required information. You can also send a submission in by email, by post, or you can hand deliver it to Greater Wellington's offices. However, no matter how you choose to submit, they must reach Greater Wellington by 5 p.m. Wednesday, 22nd of September. So if you're posting, you need to make sure that you've allowed enough time for that to happen. Now, you have to provide a copy of your submission to the applicant at the same time. If you do your submission online, that's done automatically. But if you choose to email it, or if you're doing it by post, then you'll also need to email a copy to Mary O'Callaghan at GHD, who's the planner for RiverLink, or post it to the GHD post office box that I've put there. But as I say, the preference is for applications to be lodged online, because all of that administration is then dealt with for you. So what needs to be in your submission as kind of the minimum content? So it's your name, your address, your contact details. You need to tell the council what you want them to do. Do you support or oppose? Why do you support or oppose or have a neutral view? Do you want them to grant or decline the applications, and whether you want to be heard? And you can have a different view for RiverLink than you have for KiwiRail. So the online submission will ask you your view about the KiwiRail component, and it will ask your view about the RiverLink component. What does wish to be heard mean? So what this means is that we want to understand whether or not you want to come along to the hearing for the applications and speak in support of your submission. It's not obligatory to do this. All submissions are considered equally by the decision makers, and it's entirely your choice. If you do want to be heard, Greater Wellington will notify you of the hearing date, and you'll have an opportunity to speak to your submission. Now, if you have indicated in your submission that you don't want to be heard, you can't change your mind. If you've indicated in if you've indicated in your submission that you do want to be heard, you can change your mind subsequently. However, it's really important to note that if you want to be heard, Greater Wellington will make heroic efforts to make sure that you have that opportunity. And you can speak to your submission regardless of whether you support or oppose the applications. So as I mentioned, Ministry for the Environment has created the Everyday Guide to the RMA, which is a series of documents that deal with all of the different stages of participating in New Zealand's planning processes, so resource consents, hearings, and the like. So what happens once you've made a submission? So going back to the diagram that I had before, once the public submission process closes, so this bottom left-hand corner, there'll be a number of different activities that occur before a hearing, including preparation of evidence. Council will prepare a report, and then there'll be a hearing. And the hearing is where the applicant and submitters and the council talk in support of, in the case of the applicant, why they think the application should be granted, and in the case of submitters, to the points that they've raised in their submissions. So once the submission period closes, Greater Wellington and Hutt City will summarise those submissions, and they'll assess them and make recommendations. And this will be documented in a report that they produce called the Section 42A report, or the Officer's report. And this report will be publicly available. KiwiRail and RiverLink will provide evidence in support of their applications once it's published. So once all of this information is available, submitters who wanted to be heard will have the opportunity to prepare and submit evidence in response, but only if they're providing expert evidence. And that evidence must be related to the original submission. And so expert evidence is where you're qualified in a particular topic. So for me, I'm a planner, and so I can provide planning expert evidence, and I can provide my opinion about things. There's no requirement for submitters to provide expert evidence, and So this occurs when submitters have particular topics that they are interested in, and they need to provide technical information about those. And so preparation of the report, evidence, must be submitted in accordance with predetermined timeframes, and that's all managed by Greater Wellington and Hutt City Councils. So at the hearing, it will run over multiple days during the day, and anyone can attend. They can come and sit in the gallery and listen to proceedings and come in and out, as long as they're quiet, obviously. The decision makers, so the independent commissioners, will listen to the various parties in order. So they'll hear from the applicants, they'll hear from the submitters, and then they'll hear from the council as regulators. And there'll be a schedule and there'll be an order, and then this will be managed during the hearing. So as I've mentioned, only those submitters who identified that they wanted to be heard can speak at the hearing. And they can only speak about matters that they raised in their original submission. So you can't raise new points. Now, submitters who didn't provide expert evidence can still prepare a short statement to speak to at the hearing, and it doesn't need to be pre-circulated. So if you're a submitter who wanted to be heard and you didn't have any expert evidence, you can make a note of what you want to say, and then you have the opportunity to talk to that and to say why you've got your view. Do you want it to go ahead or not? Why? And Greater Wellington for the RiverLink project will be managing the hearing process and the schedule. And so my final slide is about what happens after the hearing. So the decision makers will meet and they'll decide whether they will grant or decline the applications, so RiverLink and KiwiRail. If they decide to grant them, they'll also identify which conditions will apply. And so those conditions will manage different aspects of the project. They'll issue a decision, and Greater Wellington will advise the applicants and all of the submitters, regardless of whether you wanted to be heard or not, of the outcome of that. And if there are aspects of the decision that the applicants, the council, or the submitters aren't happy with, they can decide to appeal to the Environment Court. And there's a time frame that needs to happen in. The applications are granted and there are no appeals, then Greater Wellington, Hutt City and Waikakotahi will be able to start work constructing RiverLink. So that's the end of my run through in terms of what the submission process is, what happens during the hearing, what happens after the hearing.
Thanks, Sarah. That was a very concise way of explaining what is, from the outside, a relatively complicated feeling process. So you did a very good job to condense all that. Thank you. We're now going to be joined by Anna McLellan, and Anna's going to answer some of the questions we have received during the live stream today, along with some other things that we thought we would raise as well. So I can see Anna McLellan on our screen now. Anna is a Senior Resource Advisor, Environmental Regulation, Greater Wellington Council, which is the lead regulator. Whew, it's a tough one, Anna. I don't know how you say that when you introduce yourself to people every day.
We just say G-dub.
Hey, look, we've got a couple of questions here so far. One is from Ellen, and that is this on the fast track process? Sorry if I missed this.
No.
I can cover that one. No, it's not. No. So I think Ellen's talking perhaps about the COVID-19 fast track process, which was legislation introduced last year. No, RiverLink's following the standard council process, so make an application to council and it's processed and determined by the councils. Yeah, great.
You mentioned the notice of requirement, how that affects land, both public land and private land. People that are affected probably already know, but look, can you clarify that if a business or somebody's home is affected by a notice of requirement, how would they know, just in case for some reason they don't?
They will have received correspondence already, so they would have either been directly notified as part of this process, or they should have had some engagement prior to that.
Great. And so the assumption would be if you're a business or a homeowner and you haven't been notified of being directly affected by a notice of requirement, that you're unlikely to be affected by one?
Yep, that should be the case.
Right, cool. And just again, this is just for people that might not understand the process. So if someone is concerned that maybe their business or their home is affected by this, and they're worried that maybe the paperwork hasn't got to them or something's gone wrong, how would they check or how would they look to verify which areas, particularly privately owned areas, are affected by the submission?
So we've had a few inquiries along those lines because we do appreciate it is a really big application and there is a lot of content supplied. So on our website there is the notifications email, and I think Sarah's already pointed it out in her presentation. So my suggestion, and those inquiries will come to me, so my suggestion is to simply email notification at gov.nz and we'll help you out from there.
So my name's Mark, I'm the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce. Our address is this. Is our building affected by?
Yeah, or what are the works that are in the near proximity to our building?
Right,
yeah.
That's awesome. One other thing you mentioned was that when making a submission, you can state your in support, your oppose or you're neutral. Can you explain what if you are in support but with changes? So I support the project in its concept, but I don't support one specific element, or I want it changed, or this thing moved, or how does one go about doing that effectively?
To be honest, Mark, pretty much exactly as you've described it. So you can say that you support something, but you can explain why or what you support. And so you can say, well, I support X, Y, and Z, but I'd like A, B, and C to change.
Right. Yep. Great. Also, so my understanding with some of the designs as they stand is they're not finalised designs. Some of the specific areas are in draft or they're concepts, and they'll be progressed as the project continues. How can somebody best understand what is a concept proposal for part of the project versus this exact thing as represented on a map or a diagram is going to be what happens? What's the best way to understand that?
Oh, that's a really good question, Mark. And look, there's always a tension there, and it's a particular challenge with really big projects, because what you're trying to balance up is certainty versus flexibility. And a lot of what we look at is outcomes. But for some people, it's much easier to understand what's going on when there's a lot of detail. So what we've got is confirmed footprints. We've got a clear idea of what the application involves. There are details of it that will still be worked through, and but what we've done is give as much information as we can at the moment. Really important that some flexibility is retained, though, because a contractor might come up with a really cool and innovative way of doing something, which means it can be done more effectively with fewer effects. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that there's still that opportunity to do that. And that's why we focus on outcomes. We want to set a really clear framework that says these are the effects, this is how we'll manage them, and the conditions is how that gets secured. And look, the decision makers in council need confidence in that as well. But we also want to make sure that we don't have something that says you have to use widget A when a contractor comes back to us and says, hey, you know what, widget B, it's so much better. It does a better job. It's better in all of these ways. So there is a balance there that we need to manage.
That's great. You mentioned, Sarah, footprint. The footprint is confirmed. So just to clarify, what you're meaning there is that the physical land areas that the project's going to affect, they've been defined. So and again, with of course taking into effect that flexibility point you just mentioned, but as far as the project's intentions are, the land use that's in the consent documents is we're not going to be whacking off another 300 metres of riverbank somewhere unless things are a huge surprise at the end.
No, look, that's exactly right, Mark. So the designation footprint in the project area is as is in the application.
Yeah, great. And just one other thing you mentioned was the expert evidence. And you explained that a lot, but it was still, there's a chance it might be misunderstood, because on one hand you said that to submit, it's only if you have expert evidence, and then you said also, but you can submit if you don't have expert evidence. So just to, again, make sure we're really clear on what constitutes an expert. If I have a tenancy that's on the border of the project as a business owner, can my expert evidence be on my business? Can it be can it be an expert on my own effects? If I'm a homeowner, am I an expert in, what's just if you can elaborate a little bit more on that for us.
Yeah, look, it is something quite complicated. Anna, this is probably a question that you get a lot at Greater Wellington. Did you maybe want to cover it off from the regulator perspective, and then I can pick anything up?
So I guess we would consider an expert to be, so if one of our submitters looked to engage a specialist in that field, and traffic might be a good example, if you want to bring on board a traffic engineer to support your submission. So there's slightly different timeframes for the submission of their professional statement about the proposal, and that sits 5 working days out from the hearing. When we receive a submission, we do advise of the process as we move through it. So we do give advice around what that type of content is and when it is expected in the process. So it's not something that submitters need to be really mindful of. We will tell them when and where it is required.
Got it. And just so what's the rough timeframes between the applications closing and the hearings or the opportunities to verbally present? Is there a rough time frame in mind for that?
Yeah, so we're looking, so submissions close 22nd of September at 5 p.m, as pointed out in Sarah's application, and we have scheduled in the hearing provisionally at this stage. I can't recall the exact date, it's late November. So that's the time frame we're looking at. And in between the close of submissions and the day of the hearing, there's a number of steps that are worked through by both the regulators and the applicants team, and that includes the preparation of the reports, which are then made public as we go through that process.
Okay. Yeah. So roughly 2 months between submissions closing and the provisional schedule for the hearings. Great. I'm really thinking if somebody does want to engage an expert consultant or somebody to support them, these types of people aren't able to drop things on a dime and be available the next day. So getting things booked in advance would be useful, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And the submitter evidence, if they are providing expert evidence, is the last to be provided. Right. So they get the opportunity to see what the council's produced, see what the applicants have produced, and respond to that. Yeah.
Somebody just asked, is there a cost for the submitters to present their submission at a hearing?
So no, there's no cost to turn up to the hearing and present. If a submitter is engaging an expert, then there's obviously a cost around that. But in terms of turning up to the hearing, presenting, no, there's no cost whatsoever.
Right. And somebody's asked, would things like mobility parking be covered in the resource consent? There's some concern about a loss of disabled parking.
So this is one of those things where around level of detail. So we haven't got all of the detail around parking. We know that there will be a loss of parking, but there's quite a lot of information in the application about that. But in terms of what the new parking looks like, there is a condition of consent that will cover that.
Okay. Yeah. If that was an area that somebody had specific concern and wanted to make sure that was voiced or heard, or that the project understood it, is this the right process to have that be heard? Is a submission and support, but with a specific comment around parking or around mobility or anything else? Is that the right mechanism to have that opinion or that feeling or that information being produced?
Oh, look, completely, Mark. I mean, people need to make their own decision about which parts they support or oppose, and whether they want the application to be granted or declined. But certainly the submission is exactly the right process to be putting those views across.
Got it. So this is a yes, no to the project. It's also if it does go ahead, these are the things I want to see included, right? We've lost Sarah briefly.
Yeah, but just to confirm that yes, this is the right process. If there are details in the application, absolutely highlight information.
So again, just to clarify for people that are watching, this isn't you support it, but want some changes. Once consent is granted, there's not a second round to come back to and throw in your opinions. This is your chance to
So you need to your submission needs to cover all matters that you want to raise at the hearing moving forward. So I think Sarah touched on in her application, you can't come to the hearing and then decide that you're going to speak on a completely different matter. You do need to stay within the scope of your submission.
That's great. Someone just commented that when they tried to do their public submission online, it stated that there may be a small fee to pay for the independent commissioners.
That fee will be paid by the applicant. So there's no cost to submit this. Yeah.
And the applicant, just to clarify in this case, terminology-wise, is we're talking about Kiwi Rail and the Greater Wellington Regional Council.
Hutt City and Wakapahi.
I've got the wrong entities in my head for a moment. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, you've got some of the entities. It just really highlights that there are a lot of moving parts to this one. Yeah. It's an amazing project. Lots of people involved.
Great. So completely free process for people watching today that want to make a submission is the key point, right? What else have we got here? I think we're just about coming to a close of the questions. Is there anything that either you, Sarah, or Anna would like to just add to today to make sure people understand about the process or how things work?
Anna?
I'd just reiterate, and Sarah's mentioned it, as the Ministry for the Environment has produced some really good user-friendly documents about how to make a submission and about the whole publicly notified process. So definitely refer back to those documents. But if you do have any questions about the regulatory process, feel free to use that notifications email. We're very quick on it. It'll come straight to me and I'll be able to respond to you quickly.
Great. And so I can reiterate my understanding is this is not a scary, complicated process. It doesn't need to be 6,000 pages of diagrams and words. It can be as short and concise as somebody likes. And the verbal presentation part, it's not a courtroom. There's no interrogations. There's no lawyers going to be counter interrogating, and it's very friendly and it's designed to get people's opinions, right?
Yeah, there is no cross-examining. There's nothing along those lines. It's simply an opportunity, and I think the word hearing makes it a little bit scary at times. It's an opportunity simply to come along and put a voice to your submission.
Yeah.
And look, if people and all submissions are treated equally, so regardless of whether or not someone wants to be heard or they're not, the decision makers will consider all of those submissions. So it's people need to make a choice, make their own decision about what they want to do, and it's not intended to be scary.
Great. Hopefully people have got that message from today. So thank you both for sharing all the information that you have. And as I said before, it's a big topic, and there's lots to understand. So I'm sure today was very, very useful for people that are watching and that will watch the delayed version of this. Like everybody, as a chamber, our job is to be the voice of business. We've been really actively involved in this RiverLink project from the outset, both advocating for it to get across the line, and now working through details with the parties involved. And to be most effective at being your voice of business, the way we can do that the best is to know what your voice is. So look, we work every day with businesses, and we welcome you to get in touch with us directly. Let us know what your feelings are, what your opinions are. If you want anything to be communicated through our voice, please make sure we know about it, and we will be there to work for and with you. As well as the submission process, in parallel with this process, there is currently a travel and parking survey that's online right now, that's being run by the RiverLink project to help get an understanding of the impact of the loss of the car parks, primarily in the Riverbank car park, that is part of the submission. So you've probably heard about this survey already. We've emailed people directly, as well as through our Hutt Valley Business Weekly. If you haven't yet had a chance, I really encourage you to jump on. It's a very, very quick survey. It won't take long. But let the project know what your specific issues and impacts of parking in the CBD are. That will make a huge difference to how the project plans and works with that issue. There's also some gift vouchers as prizes for participating, so there's a nice little bonus in there as well. We'll make sure there's a link for that survey on the Facebook post for this video at the end. Thank you again, Sarah and Anna. You've been really, really informative, and thank you for your time. Again, everybody, if you want to know any more, jump on to the Chamber website, and we'll have links to make sure you know where to go. And please make a submission. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.